I bring a guy who has a powerful blend of strategic insight and technical mastery, and more importantly, data as the fourth pillar. He is the author of this book.
Life is a full circle because now I'm at Informatica. So actually they were starting to form the Informatica practice, and at that time they were looking for youngsters, let's call them freshers or whatever, people just out of university and just trained. This is something you need to do. And at that time, we are naive and we are looking at every opportunity we can get. And I said, yeah, it sounds fun. And first book I started reading was the Kimball book, right? Tesla, as we all know, is not just a car, it's a data machine. So that is the way we want every board and CEO to think of data.
There's a gentleman called Scott Taylor. He is a phenomenal storyteller. He actually used the word truth and meaning.
You and your teams are focusing on demand generation.
I'm just looking at the book right now. Is the case study by Audi, right? I'm sure you have other case studies in the book as well, but tell me if you can actually give me a minute of how all of this came about, because it's very public and it's fascinating. Recently, I heard this lawyer who used ChatGPT to go find out a defense for his case. And with its hallucination, ChatGPT actually made up a couple of stories. Right. He was debarred from law. Hey, this is your friendly neighborhood Smarchitect. Today's guest on Smarchitect Shortcast. I bring a guy who has a powerful blend of strategic insight and technical mastery. He's a well-known individual in the data management ecosystem and brings deep expertise on cloud modernization, metadata-driven architecture, and more importantly, data as the fourth pillar. He is the author of this book and, an executive guide for scaling AI. Siddharth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Arvind.
Awesome. Maybe let's start a little bit with your journey on, how you started going down this road, and here we are, data as a fourth pillar. So just 2 minutes of how this became.
Absolutely. I mean, I started off actually by mistake landing in the data space. So I was an engineer by background. So I thought engineers are really, code heavy people, and I was putting all my energy into coding. A lot of people, I guess, in that era, like 20, 15 years ago, in the same boat, right? One more thing in common. I actually then found out, was put at Accenture, where I actually started off my professional career into, at that time, they were starting to form the Informatica practice. And, their life is a full circle because now I'm at Informatica. So actually, they were starting to form the Informatica practice. And at that time, they were looking for youngsters, let's call them freshers or whatever, people just out of university and just trained. So they said, yeah, this is something you need to do. And at that time, we are naive and we are looking at every opportunity we can get. And I said, yeah, it sounds fun. And first book I started reading was the Kimball book, right? So I think we have all read this. And at that time,
Kimball
I was wondering,
aren't they considered like the father of data warehouse or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So when I started reading that and getting a perspective on, but in hindsight, right, I think that shaped a lot of the concepts in my mind, because the great thing was, although this was part of Informatica COE, I was first brought into the concepts part of it, where I was taught dimensional modeling and I was taught all your schemas, star schemas and snowflakes, and all of that is different to the snowflake technology, which a lot of people get confused with.
Type 2 slowly changing dimension, type 1
type 2 and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I found myself actually fascinated with this whole architecture as aspect of it. And of course, when I got used to tools, Informatica, one of them, but I was also learning at that time a lot ab initio and SAP solutions and ODI. So I was trying to basically use the sponge analogy, get as much as knowledge I could at that time. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I started off in Accenture, actually falling into the data space, right? And over time, I found out I worked with various programs there, and after that moved to other system integrators like Cognizant, for a decade plus. And then over time, working with several customers found myself most comfortable in the architecture space. So I found myself being very conceptual oriented, and I guess the Kimball concepts helped me a lot in that journey. That's where I landed and found myself very much always questioning the concepts rather than always looking at the actual implementations behind the scenes. Although I did a lot of that as well in my early decade. So that was kind of been my journey, let's say the first half of it, and then the second half moved primarily into architecting data strategies, looking at much more the business values out of it, looking at how data can be connected to different business functions, start creating synergies between that. So that was kind of has been my second half of my journey. And 7 years ago, I started at Informatica, really because I wanted to also see the world from a product standpoint and see how the different functions of a product organization could work together. And that's been a great journey. I've been in different roles at Informatica, and that's been an area for me as well. I keep finding new roles within my organization. But all in that data space, right? So that's been a lucky thing for me. So over the last 3 years, I'm part of our CTO organization as the chief architect in EMEA. So that's been kind of my journey. And of course, we can go more into it, Arvind, and all the learnings I wanted to kind of put and package it into the book, which we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And look, I've talked to multiple authors in my past, and everybody have a common theme. There are 3, 4, 5 specific incidences that they remember. Of course, there's a journey as well. That one gave them the urgency to write this kind of a book, right?
Right.
And then 2, they also felt they are the right, I guess, authors to write that book because they are put in that situation where they are almost answerable to that situation, right? So for many reasons, they felt that they are the right people to write that kind of book. Can you maybe give me those things that stuck to your mind? A CDO conversation, some big company in Europe that you had and that talked about this. What stays in your mind?
No, it's a great question. And I think it's very well linked to the journey part of it, because one of the core aspects that I found, and it's not just me, just to call out, I have a co-author, Sujay, that you see, who's also been part of writing the book together. But the core seed was, I think, formed because in this journey that I mentioned about, although the technology has changed heavily, even architectures have changed, right? And we can go deeper into that. We've moved towards much more distributed, federated architectures, data products, etc. coming in.
And it changes every day. Today it's MCP, tomorrow it's A2A, day after tomorrow it's something else.
Exactly. Yeah. So although there has been a lot of evolve and new ideas coming in, I still feel the core seed for the book was because when we speak with any business executive, their perception of data is largely still the same. And I'm not saying this is for every organization, but in most organizations, in my chief architect role, for instance, when we meet the data leader, it's almost like I'm feeling they are having a cry for help, right? So help me, how am I going to even convince my board and the CEO and the execs that data is important? And I think we can both correlate to this, Arvind, that we all see the importance of it, but why are we not able to translate that into the right story or the right value in terms of metrics or KPIs, etc. So I wouldn't say I was qualified
I want to double click on that a little bit. So this is very important for me also to understand. I have a point of view on this as well. But yes, I hear the same cry to go justify the existence. In fact, if you notice Gartner trends and some of these analyst trends, the life cycle or the term of a CDO keeps getting shorter and shorter as the days go by.
Yes.
And some of them attributed to the technology being so advanced that it gets closer and closer to the business and so easy to do that even a non-technical person could do it. Okay, fair. But on the other side, I'm also concerned that these CDOs are still considering themselves to more of a technical architect than a data architect, if you will, that they're not able to correlate the data story to a business story. I'm hearing you speak the same thing, but I do want to get your take on this as well.
100%, right? And not giving too much of the book away, but one of the core themes of writing the book is, if you think of it, everything you said so far, we categorize that into the supply of data. So everything that you do with regards to, building an architecture, having the right technology capabilities, helping from a process standpoint. So all of that is supply, but a CDO is not going to be able able to supply if there's no demand. That's the basic of economics that even everyone will look at it.
Yeah,
so
correct.
One of the core ideas or thoughts also of writing the book, also to your previous question, was we felt a lot has been written, because we are all readers. I'm a big reader of many data books. There are extremely capable and great authors. I'm consider myself nobody compared to that. But I felt there was a gap, that there's not enough being talked about how to really harness the demand for the data. How can business leaders can also see the collaboration with the data leaders to see, hey, this is something we can build together to gain business value. And that was one of the core reasons to write.
No, it makes sense. And thank you for that clarification. Just a curious question, another curious question back to that CDO comment. In my opinion, AI and data are interdependent. They have huge dependencies, meaning AI is the top of the pyramid where it gives you the sexy front end, the story, if you will. Data is the plumbing behind the scenes. You need both to build a house, right? If you will.
Correct.
From your perspective, what kind of a data strategy should we have in place, especially when you're thinking about enterprise grade AI deployment? Look, there are so many people out there like Randy Bean, for example. They keep talking about AI deployments. They've done many of those, right? Sol Rashidi, Randy Bean, all of these leaders.
Yes.
But I keep thinking, look at an average person, right? An average person cannot just follow a Sol Rashidi and a Randy because they have their own identity. So what do you think are the solid data strategy components to help an average CDO, not a exotic CDO like a Sol or Randy, if you will, or even you for that matter? Yeah.
No. Don't put me in that bucket. But to go to your point, even AI, right? Because there's a lot of buzz about AI, especially, and we know AI has been there for a long time, but there's been a lot of buzz in the last 3-4 years due to generative AI and now agentic, etc. But even here, what is important is AI is a means to the goal. So coming back to my previous point, the first thing is, before you even build your data or AI strategy, look at what your board and CEO wants to do. Whether it's, they are, for example, I'll give you a few examples of what we are seeing as things happening in Europe, at least, where I'm mostly part of. For example, there's a lot of focus on EU regulations, because we need to ensure that, we are adhering to the AI Act, if you take AI as the example, or if you are adhering to ESG, which is a big trend in Europe, but also getting a lot in North America. We need to make sure. Now, taking specific examples, we see a lot of manufacturing enterprises move away from purely only selling products to selling services. And what does all this mean? You need the right AI solutions to accelerate that. So first, identify what you're trying to do, right? That's, I think, for every AI leader as well, it's important to first become a business, savvy person, understand what exactly is the business transformation goals, where AI can make the difference. So that is the first part before we go into data strategy at all. Then I think, again, going back to the demand and supply, that demand will lead to certain things you need to do from a supply side. But again, to give a cookie cutter example, I think the key aspect for AI is context, because as we get more and more agents coming in and, more and more proliferation of AI services coming in, it's not just data, because a lot of times when people think data, they only think about the physical data. So here the context is, I think, as important, or may become even more important with AI coming in. And just to give one more perspective there, I've had discussions with AI leaders who say, hey, now when agentic is coming in, we don't need any of this, because the agents will themselves get all the relevant data from SaaS applications or ERPs or CRMs. But the context of your enterprise, so going back to what is important for your enterprise, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what does you want to do as a business, all that is not going to be in your application landscape or in your agents. And if you try to put that in your agents, it's going to be extremely expensive for each and every agent to have all the prompts and all the memory and all of that.
Context, again, back to that. Yeah, right. Correct.
So that is where the context needs to come, I feel, from a much more holistic data strategy. That is the core. Everything around that will fit in. You can have data products on top of it to deliver faster value. You can have, the right unstructured data management in place. You could have the right master data in place, etc. All will fit in this, I feel, core of having this context.
Well said. I think, see, the two parts of this, the context and the content. In what you said, basically your context is the business context at which what value we're trying to deliver that aligns to the organizational goal. And then the content could be the data and the technology that actually delivers that value, right?
Correct.
But right now, to your point, many CDOs are going reverse, where they build the content and then they go find a context to go fit that into, right? versus understanding the context and then go and find. Now AI is almost forcing you to do that, because without the context, AI will not serve a purpose, right? So there's no value there at all. By the way, you mentioned the EU AI Act. Do want you to know that there is a White House AI action plan that was released earlier this year as well. So
I've seen that. Yes.
Right? It's a very comprehensive plan, but I think it'll take another year for it to become more of a stick than a carrot, right? Sure. They've just started this journey, so I'm hoping a year from now we'll see the same kind of rigor that some of the European companies have as well. Okay, switching on to the book. So there are a few things. I did check out your website, datathefourthpillar.com. And essentially, when I go to the website, there are some things that stood out for me just from a process and a framework perspective. I want to deep dive into it. First of all, you're positioning this book as an executive level, right? As a board level, even beyond just the executives. So why now? What is the urgency now?
I think we all know the importance of data now more than ever. Let's put it that way, because we've seen enough instances. And I'll take a quote from the book actually to answer that question. We actually use a quote in the book saying data is like fire. And what does that mean? Because we've had many analogies. Data is the new oil, data is electricity, blah, blah, blah. But we put some thought into this because we wanted, to your point, this to be understood by boards and execs. And hence we try to also use a similar language, which is not very technical in nature and should be something that even a non-data individual should understand. Sure, there are some elements in there which might help if you understand data already today, but even without context. So anyway, coming back to it, we've used a quote saying data is like fire. Why? Because for every enterprise today, fire can be both positive or negative. Why is that? Because fire can burn down a house. Similarly, if you have the data or don't have the right data or the right context behind the data, we have seen innumerable examples now also publicly where, especially with the advent of AI and Gen AI, that has really been a big issue, right? Because either the data was not there. And when I say data here, I include context, right? So the context was not there, and hence the AI didn't give the right answer in often cases to an end customer, etc. And that resulted in that fire analogy of the brand, or a lot of heavy fines. But we are also seeing enough examples of data being used from fire in this concept of fire to build new things, because fire is this genesis of how light and electricity
mankind became a little bit more
exactly
educated.
But that is the opportunity we feel enterprises have, and for boards and CEOs to look at, with what I have today, what else? And this data is not just internal data; it's external. With the amount of data you are having collected today and available with your business partners or externally as well, the opportunities to completely build a new business model are there today for every enterprise. I mean, we have seen innumerable examples of how Netflix and the Teslas and all of these people have completely built a data-driven company, because they are no longer just a Tesla, as we all know, it's not just a car, it's a data machine. So that is the way we want every board and CEO to think of data, right? So of course we are not pioneers like Tesla, but we want that idea to be created, that what if I have all the power of all the context and the actual physical content? What would that be? So that's the part. That's why I
like
think
the
it's
fact
important
that you are actually constantly associating data as a boardroom topic, right? Because obviously, how to build a Tesla is going to be a boardroom conversation. And somewhere at some point in the past, they would have said, what, I want Tesla to be data heavy. I want Tesla to be very data-driven decision making. These are all words that you use in an average enterprise every single day, but they think it's it's a fluff word, right? But I think at the boardroom, when you say it, and then it trickles down all the way to your manager level and the people who do this every day, I like that. So this actually comes to my next question. You have used this word a lot, data operating model. And I'd like to deep dive into this. So what is your definition of it? How does this associate back to the boardroom conversation?
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is a great question to go one level deeper into some of the concepts in the book. So before going into data operating model, because just to explain, that will explain the data operating model better, the concept of data as a fourth pillar. So why not data as an asset? Why not data as a core pillar, etc.? The reason why we say fourth pillar is because data is as good as how the rest of the operating model works with it. So the operating model is people, processes, and technology. Most companies have, when you go to a board, they always talk about my people strategy, right? So they're always talking about hiring and ensuring their employees are happy and so on. They always have a process strategy. They have a chief operating officer or a business lead who's looking at a process, in order to cash, just as an example. They always have a tech strategy. You have a CIO in place who's looking at tech, and AI could also fit in the tech strategy. So what we are saying is, for the data to strategy to work, it needs to be alongside these three. It not as a byproduct of one of these three where it's sandwiched. And just to be very clear what I mean by that, also a lot of data leaders today perhaps report to a CIO, just giving one example. That means it's sandwiched under technology.
Yep.
Right? So what we are saying, data as a fourth pillar, it needs to be next to these, but it also needs the help of these, because your data landscape is as good as the people contributing to it, if you have the right processes around it, and if you have the right technologies to support it, right? So all these are very important for the data pillar. And hence the data operating model is having the right data strategy in place and the right architecture to support that with elements. And just to go give a sneak peek of it, we've kind of have three layers in the data operating model. Primarily, the top one is more like a data products layer, which is the exposing layer for any use case, whether it's AI, whether it's any kind of business value they want to use.
Very
use case specific. Okay. The middle layer, we called it the data intelligence layer. So this is where the content and the context lies. So we've called it the context, but also content, because things like reference data, master data, reusable set of data about your core context of the business, say customers or products or suppliers. This could be different for different organizations. That is the intelligence layer. And of course, in the bottom is the raw layer. That's where all the raw data, whether it's collected or not, whether it's still in applications, not going into details of the technology, but conceptually you need some place where even the raw layer is needed, because in a lot of cases, and this is not sequential that every use case needs to go through this well that you need to dig through these layers. Sometimes you may directly hit the raw layer. Sometimes for context, especially on this, I'm sure we can get to that with maturity of the organizations. The intelligence layer might be their starting point, right? But in a lot of cases where the business is not yet data ready, let's call it, or savvy enough, the products might be a good place to start, right? So we're also giving different options in this operating model.
Since you're a Kimball Inman guy, long time ago when I started learning,
right.
First thing they taught me was staging area, curated area, and analytics area, right? Then later on, medallion said bronze, silver, gold. But I think these are all, I think the big difference between what you're saying and the definition of those things back, if you take the Inman Kimball, they talked about the how. How do you build a staging? What are the best practices? And then the curated and, the type 2 SED, the details, which honestly, not a lot of business leaders care about, right?
Exactly.
Then the medallion said, okay, you know what? Now you have structured and unstructured data. How do I now ingest it into this at a high value, high velocity, the 5 Vs and all of that good stuff? Again, more into the what's, right? I think the way you're defining it, you're going to the top of the food chain, which is the why.
Exactly
right?
that.
What is the context, more importantly, than just the content and how to manage the content? I like the definition. There's a gentleman called Scott Taylor. He is a phenomenal storyteller. He actually used the word truth and meaning, which is similar to context and content, right? The context is the meaning, and then the content is the truth. You cannot fade the truth, so to speak. Whatever the data says is what the data says, right?
Absolutely.
Good or bad. So no, I love the fact that you're slowly, it almost is sounding like a maturity model, right? Back in the Kimball Inman days, it was more of the how. In the medallion architecture days, it was more of the what. Now you're going towards the why, which is more and more coming closer to AI and back to that boardroom discussion. Love it. I want to dive into metrics. So I know that you had talked about total addressable value and I think it was expected addressable value as well.
Yes.
This value is what I believe in day in and day out. So when you use that word, I absolutely loved it. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Because, the other point was that the core aspect, as you said, is the data operating model, which is the supply. And there's a huge aspect of demand as well, how leaders or data leaders should work to gather the right demand, right? And then eventually when they are going to do this, they will need some sponsorship and budget from the board and the CEO when the data is the fourth pillar. And for those, as you rightly said, we need metrics or KPIs to share back what is it we are doing as a result of this, right? Just like how you ask, what is my people contribution to my top line, bottom line, or how are the processes helping to accelerate? You measure the processes and the time and the quality and all of that, right? So the idea with these 3 KPIs, there are more, but these are the ones I would say are the gist of it in the book. What we meant by these is and it's almost fitting into that maturity part you hinted on, Arvind. So when every CDO or data leader starts this journey, they need to look at all the possibilities I have today.
Okay.
Forget what I have from a supply and a data operating model perspective. Just like when you enter a business today, you look at your TAM, right? You look at the TAM in the business, and that gives you the opportunity. You say, oh, there's a huge TAM there.
Yeah.
And even if I get a small piece of that TAM, I'm still doing a great job. That's how you are when you even start a product, right? You're looking for these kind of opportunities. So our starting KPI, so if you imagine the outermost bubble, and these 3 KPIs will fit into 3 bubbles. So if you imagine the outermost bubble, that's what we mean with TAV. So TAV, total addressable value, is the TAM for data. So if I today sit with my business and the board and know that, hey, these are all the strategic, operational, every opportunity I have, forget if I have the people, process, or technology to deliver that today. What is my TAM with data, and what value will that be created out of that? That is my TAV. And in that maturity journey, we also say, hey, you should track this TAV over time, because this TAV with data should hopefully be increasing. That means you are maturing and the demand is increasing. That's a good way to measure and report to your leaders, right? I'll pause before I go into the other one.
Are you saying meaning your TAV should also track, yes, over time you're collecting more data, more types of data, so that you can serve more business? Is that what you're trying to say? Did I get that right?
It's a chicken and egg situation. At this point, I would say it doesn't matter whether you're collecting data or not. If you're collecting all the context and you are making sure that you and your teams are focusing on demand generation. So typically every business leaders will have business demands, right? If you are on top of that, so if you're on top of, again, distill it in a very simplistic way. If you have a sales organization, you're consistently looking at if my sales pipeline is increasing quarter on quarter. Similarly, if you think of that analogy to a data leader, they are checking if their data opportunities, let's call it that way to simplify it, is that increasing over time or not? Because the opportunities are there. It's all about whether you are getting those opportunities tapped into the data pillar or not in this context.
Absolutely.
That is that TAV. So imagine just like how a sales organization works, the TAV is if I'm getting enough TAM created for my data or not. So that's the outcome. Then the EAV is, now you're getting into the next level of that bubble or KPI. From everything I have now identified in my TAV, which ones I need to focus on because I cannot deliver everything today. So which ones I will choose, both based on criticality of demand, but also now based on what I can deliver with my data operating model. Maybe the demand is there for a rocket, but I only have a car today.
Sure.
So that is my EAV. Because that will be what I can actually deliver. Because if you don't deliver the value, next time the business is not going to work with you to do the next program. So that is that the middle circle. And again, here what we have said is the maturity journey, you should be tracking that EAV over time. And that should come closer and closer to that TAV. The closer you come to the TAV means you're actually having the right supply. So that's now back to the actual raw data or content. You have enough to do that. And finally, the innermost circle is RV or realized value. That is the actual value you have delivered so far. And again, I'm just explaining the KPIs without explaining how we calculate them, because in the book, we've detailed how to calculate each one of them.
I love the fact that you are associating almost a go-to-market process, if you will, right? The TAM, SAM, and SOM, similar to how you can actually address the data value. Love it. I think this is a great way of inventorying your data, but also inventorying your context so that you can understand what businesses you serve, what problems you're trying to solve before you go and see, here are the amount of data I have, and then, categorize them to curated staging, what have you. Fantastic. I think one of the things that I was very excited, and I'm just looking at the book right now, is the case study by Audi. Right? I'm sure you have other case studies in the book as well, but tell me if you can actually give me a minute of how all of this came about, because it's very public and it's fascinating.
Yes. So it's a great question, Arvind. When Sujay and me, we started writing the book, of course, we are both first-time authors, first of all. So, but at the same time, also, we felt, now that you understand the core purpose of why we wrote the book, we felt, hey, if this is going to hit business audience or execs, just explaining the concepts or even showing KPIs may work, but we really need a practical example of this.
Case study,
And as
yeah.
much as we have that experience, it's best said with someone who is doing this day in, day out. That was the core idea of doing this. And of course, then we tried reaching out to our networks, and actually this came out of, if I can call it like a cold call of sorts, where we just found a great article by the CDO of Audi, and we just reached out to him saying, hey, this is something we are working out on. Would you be interested in collaborating with us? He started understanding our mission and goal, very much like how we are doing today, Arvind. And he loved it because he of course could correlate with a lot of the challenges and how we are trying to address that. So he was on board after a few discussions, and he really happy with how the case studies come out. In basically in every chapter of the book, there is the end of the chapter is the case study of how Audi has gone through this journey. And the great thing, if I'm now speaking on his behalf, of course, the great thing is in this journey we've both learned from each other. I have learned so much from how Audi being a German company, how they are so methodical in some of their processes. So going into the process aspect of this, but a lot more. And I think he has also learned from our frameworks. And what I hear when I've been speaking to him, he's also implementing or looking to implement some of the concepts. So I think these kind of collaborations has been great, and I'm sure the readers will see exactly what we're talking about, because the case study I think really puts context to everything, right? Just like how you need the context of data, I think for our book, Audi has given that right context for scaling.
And I think even spoken like a consultant, right? The case study always gives you the walk. Exactly. There's one thing about speaking it and saying, yes, I have the experience, but there's another thing about somebody else living your story and essentially 100%. Saying, yes, this framework actually works and I'm living through this today. So that's 100%. Well done. Really, really well done.
Yeah. And just to conclude on that, just yesterday we were at one of our book launch events in Sweden, and we had so many people coming to us after that saying, thank you for putting that case study, because now it's not just, I have something I can correlate to. There's an actual example there. So I can correlate my actual situation, my maturity journey, my demand, supply, etc. with exactly that case study.
For people who hopefully will get the book, actually, there is a line down there that talks about Audi specifically, even at the intro page itself. So well done, Siddharth. I really like the fact that you have the walk as well. Now, curious question. You came up with a lot of technical background, technical certifications, and then you jumped into the architecture. Here we are talking like a CDO, right? Obviously, this is your background. If I'm a person who's deeply technical, a CDO, if you will, right? But my focus is the how on the AI, not the why. Not intentionally, but that's my background. Sure. What is your advice for those kind of people to quickly pivot, to focus more on the context than the content?
Well, that's a great question because I think this is another critical need of the hour, especially with everything we are dealing with today, with so many new technologies, so much innovation happening. Being a technologist is very important. I would say it's a very critical facet to have, to be very curious and understand how technology works. But I think the difference in future is going to be created by individuals who can also understand the business and how to do it. I think like everything, you need to have curiosity, right? So you need to understand each and every industry that you are interested in. It doesn't need to be, you need to know every industry, but say you're a big fan of cars. I'm just giving an example since we just talked Audi.
I am, by the way.
So since you're fascinated with cars, you need to know everything about how the business works, right? From how production works. Like I'll give you an example. When we started speaking with Audi, I mean, I know a little bit about cars, but I didn't know the depth to which Rudiger, who's our case study and the CDO of Audi, explained. He explained, the amount of effort from process and people and technology and data which goes into just putting, the welding into the shop floor of a car, and how much that is a critical element, how they track the temperature of that. So that is what we mean with business. You really understand how the business works, not just the outer car, but exactly, even if you don't know each nut and bolt, I mean, that will be always difficult, but at least you understand the process of how the business functions. So that's how I started getting into it. Of course, I started also talking to a lot of people who are business leaders. I mean, I think the best way to learn is to get yourself into the mix of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fascinating. I think that's a great advice. CDOs, please pay attention. And again, kudos to you on the book itself. You do talk about not just the framework. See, what I'm more fascinated about is it gives you almost an assembly of how to think through this, right? Because some people struggle. See, some people are so much in the weeds that they're not able to see the forest in the trees. They are so much focused on the individual problems they're trying to solve. So thank you again. One topic or question for you. If you were to have a magic 8 ball and look in the mirror, right? Given the emergency of data as an asset, data as a fourth pillar, if you will, what are the trends that you are excited about and scared about?
I think we can put both of that in the same answer, because I think you can guess what I'm going to say. I'm very excited and also thinking about, of course, agentic frameworks and agentic AI, because I feel there is so much opportunity with this evolution. And I know there is a lot of people saying, oh, this is just one more curve in that curve of, how we started with computers and then we went to mobile and smartphones, then we went to cloud. Now we are getting into really Gen AI. But I feel there is a massive spike in that. If you think of all these as,
adoption spike, you mean, in that whole...
Not just adoption spike in every manner. Spike in adoption, of course, like ChatGPT's adoption has been faster, but also spike in learning curve. Spike in possibilities from a business perspective. So in every way, I see a spike here. And now it's all up to us. Like, this is just again a means to something. So that's why I say it's both an opportunity, but you can get scared with it as well, because how we use it today, I think that can be determining us as a community, of course, how it is it beneficial or it ends up being, something we want to be scared of. Yeah,
there are, I would say, so many use cases out there. Recently I heard this lawyer who used ChatGPT to go find out a defense for his case, and with its hallucination, ChatGPT actually made up a couple of stories. He was debarred from law because later on the judge found out that these were just made up stories and there is no evidence. Ironically,
again, the whole missing the context from that fire analogy.
Exactly. And the problem was, lawyers are supposed to be people who are detailed, people who research a lot before they say any statements, right?
Which is the scary part here, right? So that you don't use the solutions without using
calls and
judgment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up, Siddharth, is there any piece of wisdom, advice that you'd like to share with my listeners?
No, I think we talked a lot of things, Arvind. So, I think we've covered the key points. I just hope this helps in a small way, a drop in the ocean with this discussion and the book, of course, that all of us start looking at data at the level it deserves to be looked at. Right? That is my only parting thought here.
No, absolutely. Siddharth, thank you so much for joining me today. We have explored the most fascinating conversation I had, and what interested me the most is that data is no longer just another tool in your toolkit. It has to sit side by side with people, process, and technology. So I think fascinating conversation. I wish you good luck with your book launch, and
thank you.
Many more books hopefully to come in the future based on the feedback from this book. People, if you're listening to this, please go ahead and look for Data as a Fourth Pillar on Amazon. I'm pretty sure there are other ways to buy it as well. Siddharth, thank you so much for being on my Shortcast.
Thanks a ton, Arvind. It's been great fun.